Have you ever had a moment where someone said something rude and you knew exactly what they meant, but you just smiled and said nothing? Not because you didn't understand, but because you did. And you knew that if you reacted, it would cost you your peace, your energy, maybe even your whole day. If that's ever happened to you, then you already understand the quiet power of what I'm about to talk about. There's something people don't tell you about getting older. They talk about wisdom, experience, even grace. But they don't often talk about strategy. Not the kind of strategy you use to win arguments or impress people. I'm talking about the strategy of knowing when to speak and when to stay silent, when to step up, and when to step back and pretend you didn't notice the insult, the manipulation, the trap. Today we're going to have a real conversation about something most people overlook, but it might just be one of the most powerful tools you have after 60. And that tool is this: knowing when to pretend to be naive, not because you're clueless, but because you're done giving away your peace for free. There are times in life when pretending not to see, not to understand, not to care, can actually protect your mind, your energy, and your dignity far more than any argument ever could. So in this video, we're going to walk through 7 of those exact situations. 7 moments where pretending to be naive is not weakness, it's wisdom. And the first one might sound familiar to many of you. Let's say you're having a conversation with your adult child. Maybe it's your son or daughter. Maybe they're going through something, or maybe they just had a bad day. But somehow, it turns into a lecture. They start blaming you for things that happened decades ago. They say things like, "If you had done this differently, I wouldn't be like this." Or, "You were never really there for me." Or, "If you really cared, you'd help me with this right now." And your heart sinks, because you know what you gave. You remember the nights you didn't sleep, the sacrifices you made, the things you let go of so they could have more. And still, here they are, years later, throwing it all back at you like none of it mattered. Your first instinct might be to explain, to defend yourself, to try to reason with them, to remind them of everything you did. But deep down, you know how that usually goes. The more you talk, the more they twist your words. The more you give, the more they ask for. And suddenly, you're back in that role of the bad guy, just for trying to protect your heart. So what do? You stay quiet. You breathe. You let them talk. And you nod, not because they're right, but because you finally realized you don't need to prove yourself anymore. You're not on trial. You're not obligated to carry guilt you've already paid for in full. When you pretend not to be offended, when you act like their words didn't shake you, even when they did, you're taking your power back. You're ending the cycle. You're refusing to keep pouring from a cup that's already empty. That's not giving up. That's setting a boundary. There's a kind of peace that comes when you stop trying to win people's approval, especially from the people who use love as a bargaining chip. Playing naive in that moment doesn't mean you're blind. It means you see exactly what's happening, and you're choosing not to feed it. You can look them in the eye, feel the sting, and still say, I see. Then go water your plants. Go take a walk. Go watch the sunset. Because your energy deserves better than that fight. That brings us to another common moment. A more subtle one, but no less painful. It's when someone, often much younger, starts speaking to you like you've lost your sharpness. Maybe they explain something to you like you're a child. Maybe they raise their voice unnecessarily, or repeat themselves like you're hard of hearing, even when you're not. They give you that smile that's more pity than kindness. You know the one. They think they're being helpful, but what you feel in your chest is, they don't think I'm capable anymore. That's a hard feeling to swallow. Because inside, you're still you. You're still smart. You're still strong. You've just lived longer, seen more, and maybe you do things a little slower. Not because you're confused, but because you're thoughtful. Now you could snap back. You could say, I'm not an idiot, thank you very much. And sometimes, maybe you should. But more often than not, the wiser move is to simply play along. Let them think you didn't catch the insult. Let them believe you missed the undertone. Smile, nod, and say, "Thanks for explaining that so clearly." Then go on doing what you do, with the quiet confidence of someone who's lived long enough not to be shaken by condescension. Because the truth is, when someone speaks down to you, they're not showing their superiority. They're revealing their insecurity. And nothing exposes ignorance faster than your silent strength. When you play naive in that moment, you're not letting them win. You're reminding yourself that your worth doesn't need to be proven. You already lived the proof. You raised families. You built careers. You survived loss, change, and disappointment. You made it here. That's nothing to be ashamed of. That's something to honor. So don't let their tone become your truth. Don't let their low view become your mirror. When you pretend not to notice their smallness, it's because you've outgrown the need to fight for recognition. You already know who you are. And that knowing, that grounded, quiet, unshakable knowing, is more powerful than anything they could say. You see, there's a kind of dignity that doesn't argue. It just is. And sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is nothing at all, especially when you already understand everything. You know, some of the heaviest burdens we carry in life don't come from what people say directly. They come from what people expect without ever saying a word. You've probably felt it before, that invisible pull, like you're supposed to jump in and fix something just because you've always been the one who did. Maybe a family member keeps making bad decisions, and every time they fall apart, they call you. Not to take responsibility, but to unload, to vent, to cry, to stir up the storm they created and leave the cleanup in your hands. And because you love them, you listen. You try to help. You get involved. But after a while, you realize that helping them is starting to hurt you. You feel drained, emotionally exhausted, maybe even anxious when the phone rings. You start asking yourself, why am I the one holding all this? And the answer is simple, because you always have, and they know it. But here's the truth no one likes to say out loud. Just because you've always been strong doesn't mean you always have to be available. This is one of those times when pretending to be naive is actually the smartest thing you can do. When someone tries to pull you into drama that's not yours, you don't have to step in. You don't have to ask questions. You don't have to offer advice. You don't even have to respond right away. You can let their message sit. You can smile at their story and say, "Oh, that sounds rough," and leave it there. Not because you don't care, but because you care about yourself too. Because your heart isn't a dumping ground. Your mind isn't a sponge for other people's storms. And believe me, when you stop taking responsibility for other people's chaos, they may get upset at first. But eventually, they'll learn to clean up their own mess. Or not. But either way, you're no longer sacrificing your peace for problems you didn't create. There's freedom in that. There's strength in that. And the beauty is, you never had to say anything harsh. You just stopped showing up for the fire. You stopped adding fuel. That brings me to another trap we don't talk about enough. And it's a sneaky one, because it wears the mask of kindness. It's the belief that you always have to be available to prove you care. You know what I mean. You're sitting down to rest. You've got your tea, maybe your favorite book. The phone rings. You let it go to voicemail, and immediately, the guilt creeps in. What if they needed something? What if I'm being selfish? And so you call back. You say yes. You put your plans aside. Again. Sound familiar? Somewhere along the line, especially for women, especially for mothers, we were taught that being a good person means being endlessly accessible. That if we say, "not today," it means we don't love enough. But here's what no one tells you. When you give all of your time to others, there's nothing left for yourself. And you can't pour from an empty cup. This is where pretending to be naive becomes a quiet revolution. The next time someone says, "Hey, can you just," and you're tired, overwhelmed, or simply not in the space to give, you can pretend you didn't hear the urgency. You can say, "Oh, I'm not sure when I'll be able to help with that," or even just, "I'll think about it," and let it go. You're not lying. You're not being cold. You're creating space between their expectation and your obligation. You're reminding yourself that your time is yours. Your body is yours. Your energy is yours. Because availability isn't love, and being constantly accessible isn't loyalty. It's exhaustion wearing a mask. The truth is, people don't always appreciate what you give, but they'll always notice when you stop giving. And that's when your real boundaries begin. It's okay to let people adjust to the new you, the version of you that still loves deeply, but no longer says yes just to avoid guilt. The you that listens to her body, honors her energy, and trusts that saying "not now" doesn't make you selfish, it makes you wise. Now let's go even deeper. What happens when the person you need to protect yourself from isn't a stranger or even family, but someone you once called a friend? That one cuts deep, because friendships, especially the long ones, feel sacred. They're full of history, laughter, shared memories. They're a piece of your identity. And yet, sometimes, they quietly start to shift. The phone calls become one-sided. The conversations grow shorter. You start to feel like you're being tolerated, not cherished. And still, you stay. Not because it feels good anymore, but because the thought of letting go feels worse. This is a moment where pretending to be naive can actually give you space to grieve, to reflect, to gently pull back without confrontation. Maybe you stop calling as often. Maybe you don't answer every text right away. Maybe you decline an invitation and don't offer a reason. You create distance, not out of anger, but out of self-respect. You don't need to accuse them of anything. You don't need to demand an explanation. You already know what's happened. And pretending not to, just for a little while, allows you to reclaim your balance without burning bridges you might not want to destroy completely. Some friendships are meant to last a lifetime, others only for a season. The trick is learning to tell the difference. And once you do, holding on out of habit only delays the healing. So if there's someone in your life who makes you feel small, tired, or invisible, even if they used to make you feel seen, don't ignore that feeling. Honor it. Step back. Breathe. Let silence be the message. You're allowed to grow past people. You're allowed to walk away from what no longer brings you peace. And you don't owe anyone an explanation for choosing peace. You've earned the right to protect your spirit. You've earned the right to guard your time. You've earned the right to say, "I'm not available for anything that costs me my calm." Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is act like you don't see the shift, while your soul quietly rearranges the room to make space for something new. Because pretending to be naive isn't about playing games. It's about playing smart. It's about knowing when to speak and when to let silence do the work. It's about preserving your energy for the things and people that truly matter. And trust me, there are still moments ahead where you'll need that energy. There are still days coming where your calm will be tested. And when that happens, your quiet strength will be your greatest protection. There's something that starts to change as we get older, not just in our bodies, but in the way people treat us. Sometimes it's subtle, sometimes it's loud. But one of the most exhausting things isn't the physical aches or the long list of things to remember. It's the constant need to defend your calm from people who are just looking for a fight. And these people? They often don't show up with fists raised. They show up with sarcasm, with sideways comments, with questions that aren't really questions, but traps dressed as conversation. Have you ever been standing in your own kitchen, minding your own business, when someone walks in and says something like, "Well, someone had time to make themselves a snack, but not to call me back." And suddenly, the air in the room changes. You feel your chest tighten. You hear the tone, the jab, and you know what they're trying to do. They're not trying to communicate, they're trying to provoke. And in that moment, everything in you wants to fire back. To defend, to explain, to say, "I don't owe you an apology for taking care of myself." But then you remember, you've been here before. You've done this dance. You've spent hours in these arguments that don't go anywhere. that leave you feeling drained and guilty even when you've done nothing wrong. This is one of the most important times to play naive. Not because you don't understand what they're doing, but because you do. And you've made the quiet decision not to let their poison live in your heart. So you smile. You say, "Oh, I was just hungry." You turn around and keep cutting your apple. You change the subject, you move on. And what they don't realize is that you just won. Because the real power isn't in raising your voice. It's in knowing when to say nothing at all. People who argue to be right, not to understand, don't deserve your peace. They don't deserve your energy. And when you refuse to give them the reaction they want, they're left alone with their own bitterness. Eventually, it burns out, because you didn't add fuel to their fire. Now, here's where it gets even harder. Because sometimes, the person trying to provoke you isn't someone else. It's you. It's that voice in your head that says, "I'm so tired of this. I've been quiet for too long. Why do I always have to be the one who keeps the peace?" That inner voice can be more dangerous than any outside conflict, because it knows exactly what buttons to push. It knows your history, your pain, your limits. And when you're tired, hungry, lonely, or just fed up, it can push you into saying things you don't mean, into raising your voice, into letting all the built-up hurt explode in a moment that leaves you feeling worse, not better. So what do you do when the conflict is coming from inside? You pause, you breathe, you put your hand on your heart if you have to, and you say quietly, "Not this time." Not because you're pretending it's okay, but because you've learned that some storms are meant to pass, not be chased. Playing naive with yourself is one of the most powerful forms of wisdom there is. It means hearing that sharp thought, that triggered emotion, and choosing not to let it speak for you. It means giving yourself the grace to feel, without always needing to act. And I know how hard that is. Because sometimes silence feels like losing, like giving in, like you're letting them win. But here's the truth. The person who stays calm holds the real power. That calm is your ground. It's your home. It's your legacy. And protecting it doesn't make you weak. It makes you wise. You've spent decades learning how to care for others. Now it's time to care for your energy, your joy, your time, and your dignity. And you don't have to do it loudly. You don't have to explain it to anyone. Sometimes the strongest choice you can make is to do nothing, to step back, stay quiet, and walk away with your peace intact. Because your peace, that's your power now. You've probably spent most of your life giving your time, your heart, your forgiveness, your strength. And while all of that has shaped who you are, now is the time to protect what's left. Not out of fear, but out of love. Love for the woman or man you've become. Love for the years ahead that you still deserve to enjoy. Love for the quiet moments you've earned 1,000 times over. You don't need to attend every argument you're invited to. You don't need to fix every broken thing or prove yourself to anyone who's already decided not to see you. All you need to do is remember one simple thing. You have the right to protect your peace at any cost. So when someone tries to pull you in, when they poke and prod and wait for you to snap, don't. Just smile. Just nod. Just say, "Oh, really?" and move on. Let them sit in their frustration while you return to your calm. Let them wonder why you didn't take the bait. Let them realize on their own time that they don't control your mood anymore. And when the storm is coming from inside, when your own pain, your own exhaustion, your own fear tries to take over, close your eyes, breathe deeply, and choose again. Choose stillness. Choose dignity. Choose to act like the wiser version of you that you've become. Because at this point in your life, you're not here to fight. You're here to live, to laugh, to rest, to heal, to enjoy, and most of all, to live life on your terms, not anyone else's. If any part of this message made you feel seen, I want you to know you're not alone. There are millions of people out there feeling the same silent pressure, the same invisible expectations, the same quiet exhaustion. But here's what's different now. You're awake to it. And that awareness, that changes everything. So if you're sitting with this video right now, and something inside you is nodding, whispering, "Yes, that's exactly how I feel," then I invite you to do one simple thing. Leave a comment below with the words, "My peace is my power." That's it. A statement, a decision, a declaration that you're not here to fight every battle, solve every problem, or explain every choice. You're here to protect the life you've built and to guard the calm that you've earned. And if you found value in this message, please take a second to hit the like button and subscribe to Strong Elderly Life. This is a space where your wisdom is respected, where your journey is honored, and where your voice still matters. Every week we create content to remind you that your life isn't over, it's unfolding. And even if the world around you doesn't always see your worth, you can. Because the older you get, the less you need to prove. You're not here to be understood by everyone. You're here to understand yourself. And if that means pretending to be naive in certain moments to protect your peace, then so be it. Here's to the power of staying calm. Here's to the strength in your silence. Here's to living your best life on your terms.